Alright, welcome to the Dream Skin tutorial. In this video, I'm going to show you how to take a texture and apply it to skin so it really looks like it's a part of the human skin, and it's going to look something just like you see here. I'm also going to show you how to take some henna art and create this metal face piece, and we're going to apply it to the face and to the skin, and it's going to look exactly like this. I'm going to show you how to do all this that you see right here. So let's not mess around and get started. If you would like to follow along, go inside the Dream Skin folder inside the Project Files folder on this DVD. When you open that folder, you'll find all these files that you see right here. Here's the texture that we will be applying to the face, and we also have a channel mix file right here, which I'll show you how to use later on. I've just set the channel and have saved my settings into a file so you can load the settings, so you can get the exact same coloring that I got on my final image. That's what that file's for. And we also have the image of the eyes of the woman here, and we also have the henna art. Special thanks to Melanie for creating the henna right here so we can apply this and create that metal piece for this face. And we also have another metal texture here that we will be using to apply over the metal henna that we're going to create. So before we begin the tutorial, let me go ahead and just give you a walkthrough of the final Dream Skin image. Alright, here's the final Dream Skin image loaded up into Photoshop, and you can just open this as well if you would like to follow along. But I'm just going to go through the layers here and show you and break this down so you can see exactly how I created this. And then later on I'll give you a step-by-step tutorial so you can create the exact same effect that I did on your own image. So what I'm going to do first is make some of these layers invisible here. And let's just start off with the background, which is the eyes image here of the woman. And you can see the very first thing that I did is I applied the texture to the face. And then I masked around the face, created a layer mask over here, and then I also created this image adjustment, which is a channel mixer image adjustment. And I've already saved the settings that I have in the channel mixer file, so you can copy these settings and get the exact same color I have. And then I went ahead and created the metal henna piece that goes over the face. And of course, this is before I've applied the texture to the henna piece. And if I scroll up, we have some shadows that I placed underneath the henna. And I like to call this the rust. So it looks like the metal piece has been there a long time. So we have this really cool looking old rust look, or the metal is starting to make the skin have a different color around it. I really thought that looked pretty cool. So, and also let's scroll up here. And we also have the texture that I applied to the henna metal piece right here. And you can see that I've created a layer mask for this, but I've also adjusted the hue of this henna metal piece up here. And you can see it's just a very slight adjustment there. And I also have a hue and saturation adjustment layer that I've applied over all these layers, which enhances the blue in the eyes. If you see right when I turn this on, I'll scroll up a little bit. As soon as I turn this on, you can see those eyes start to come to life with just a little bit more color. And I'll scroll up here. We also have a shadow that goes around the nose, because since I applied this texture, it almost made the nose disappear. So what I did is I created a shadow around the nose here, and you can see how that just makes it a little bit more dynamic. And then the final layer is a nose highlight that I just applied over the nose to give that just a little bit more depth there. You see that? So it's just like a pen stroke or a paint stroke in Photoshop, just to give that nose there just a little bit more highlight so it stands out a little bit more. And that's just about it. I mean, I don't have very many layers here at all. But we also went into the channels palette, and I did some things with channels to create the henna piece and all that. So let's go ahead and start this tutorial. I'm going to go ahead and move this out of the way, and let's go back into the Adobe Bridge, and let's start off with our eyes image right here. So what you want to do is open up a photo of someone that you want to apply this custom skin texture to. Next, you'll need to open up a texture. And I've chosen this texture right here because it's almost like a paint peeling type of texture, and I thought that would be really cool to have it look like her skin is just sort of peeling off. And that's why I wanted to use this image right here. But we can see we can't really use it exactly the way it is. So we're going to modify this texture to fit perfectly over the face. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and double click on this and load it into Photoshop. Now we must get this texture here over to the project image behind here. So all we have to do is select the Move tool on the toolbar and click on this texture, and I'll just drag it, holding down the mouse, I'll drag it over to the other image, and you'll see it highlight just like that, and release the mouse, and then you'll see that it's placed on this image, and it'll also make a new layer for it. So you can go ahead and just name this layer now, and I'll call this Face Texture. And then I'll also name this layer, I like to call it Eyes. So if you've brought your texture into the image that you would like to apply the texture to, well, what you want to do first, if you're working with a face that looks just like this, then you need to almost focus on one side, because the texture is just not going to blend very well the way it is now. So what I'll do is just move this around, and I can see right here, you notice the texture is a little bit darker on this side. Well, then this would be really good to have, maybe have this on the right side of her face, so you can see, because her face here has some shadows going down this side. So what I could do is utilize that, or utilize this side of the texture and use that for this side of her face. We can lower the opacity of this layer, and that will help us see right through. Now I love how this side looks, and so to make this really look more natural, like more organic, let's make the texture look the same on both sides of the face. And, just like you have one ear, you have two ears, but they look both the same on each side of your head. Well, it's kind of like the same. It gives it more of a natural, like the texture really grew and her skin really developed in the exact same way. So what I'm going to do is select this rectangular marquee tool, and I'm only going to select right to the very middle of her nose there, just right between the eyes. And let me try that again. Right between the eyes and down the nose, right in the middle. Directly in the middle there. And then I'll release the mouse. And then now I can go ahead and press the delete key on the keyboard. Then what I'm going to do is come over here to select and deselect. We no longer need that. But we can make this identical. We can just make a mirror image of this texture and place it over on this side of her face. So what I can do is select the texture on this side and then hold down the Alt key. Now here's the trick. Pay attention. Here's the trick. Hold down the Alt key, which is the Option key on the Mac. Hold down the Control key, which is the Command key on the Mac, and then hold down the Shift key all together. And when you do that, you'll make a copy of the contents inside that layer, but without making a new layer. See, we're going to keep all this inside the same layer here. It's conservative, and it keeps things a little bit more tidy, and I like to work that way. But now that we've made this copy, while it's still selected, let's come up here to select, down here to transform, and flip this horizontal. And then come over here to the Move tool, hold down Shift, and move this towards the center, and meet the other texture on the other side. Look at that. And I'll come up here, I'll just come up here to select and deselect that. And let's zoom really closely so we can see if we've connected those two sides together. And you see how this looks? It just looks a little bit more proportionate, and I really like that. So now we don't have to get into any masking or anything like that yet. Let's focus on the top of her forehead up here and start applying a texture for this area. What we can do is select a portion of the texture down here and then paste it on a new layer and then just position it on her forehead. So what I'll do is just come over to the toolbar and select the rectangular marquee tool, and I'll just make a selection here, something like this, and I'll just move this over just a touch. Something that looks like that. You can go over here and just draw a selection. And I'm just going to try to avoid the nose area here because the texture is not so detailed in this area. And so what I'm going to do is come over here to Edit, Copy, and then go up here to Edit, Paste. And we've pasted that on its own separate layer. And I'm not going to name that layer now because I will probably end up merging this layer with the one below it here. But let's go ahead and rotate this and see if we can get it to fit on her forehead, and then just blend that in with the other texture. I'll come over here to Edit, Free Transform, and I'll hold down the Shift key, and I'll rotate this around, and so it's going in the same direction. Now I'll just position this up here, just like so. Or better yet, I'll just take this texture all the way up to the top. Alright, cool. Now I'll just go ahead and make another copy of this, just like we did below. I'll make a selection around it. I'll hold down Alt, Control, Shift, which is Option, Command, Shift on the Mac, and I will click my mouse, little arrow here on the mouse pointer. I'll click inside the selection, drag it over on this side, and then I'll come over here to Edit, Transform, and Flip Horizontal. And I'll select the Move tool and move this back. I'll hold down the Shift key too so that rides along evenly, horizontally. And I'll just connect these two right here, just where they meet. And then I'll go over here to Select and Deselect. And I'll just select the Move tool here just to make sure that this is centered, but that looks pretty good. Okay, so we need to blend this texture and make it flow into the texture below here. And what I can do is turn this opacity up to 100%, and then what I'll do is probably come up here to Edit, Transform, and just stretch this so it's going just a little bit over this other texture here. And I'm going to go ahead and select the Eraser tool with a soft brush, and I'm just doing this pretty quickly here, but you generally get the idea. I'm just going to erase away some of the texture here so it blends in just a little bit better around here. And some of these details you will not see later because this will be blended in with the skin. So this line here, we basically just want to get rid of this line. There we go, something that looks like that, just so it's seamless. And yeah, there you go. And then what I'll do is just merge this layer with the one below it, and I can simply come up here to Layer and come down here to Merge Down. And that'll take that layer and merge it with the one below it. Watch this. There you go. Well, we can go ahead and start some masking, but before we do that, let's go ahead and use the blending mode setting that we will be using to blend this texture in with the face. And just come over to the blending mode menu on this layer and come all the way down to luminosity. And now it's going off the screen here, but it's at the very bottom. You come all the way down to the very bottom, you'll find luminosity at the bottom here. Go ahead and select that, and you should see something that looks like this. Then I'll come over to the opacity of this layer and turn down to something like 24%, somewhere along there. And you can see that just blend in really nicely. Now, we wouldn't leave it like this because we have to go through and touch up some of the texture to make it really look like it's a part of her skin. And this is kind of a fun part because we're going to do some masking and all sorts of stuff. But first of all, I'm going to need to make a layer mask on this layer here. So I'll just come down to the bottom of the Layers palette, click on this button, Add Layer Mask, and then I'll come over to the toolbar and select the brush tool with a dark or black brush, and then I'll click OK. I'll right-click on the image and create somewhat of a large brush. Depending on how large your image is, you'll need a larger brush. If it's a low-resolution image, then you'll just need a smaller brush. Something that looks like this, and then I'll turn that hardness all the way down to 0. And what I'll do is just come over here with this brush and start painting around here like this. And don't worry, I make mistakes, so if I remove too much texture, I can always come back and bring it back a little bit. Either that or turn up the hardness of the brush. So it looks really gradual. So it looks like that texture is really going around her face, just something like this. There you go, and it's kind of fun to do. I'll probably leave her ears out here. I'll just come up here. And of course we don't want it in the hair, so I'll just go ahead and mask the hair. There we go. Now she has some strands of hair that has the texture applied over it, and we probably don't want that either. So I'll just zoom in a little bit closer here. And let's see, we'll move this over just a touch. And I can just make a smaller brush here and paint on her hair. Let me go ahead and just make sure this is right. Yeah, I can lower the opacity of this layer here, this face texture layer. That way I can see her hair just a little bit more clear. So just to make sure that I'm painting on her hair and I'm not touching her skin. I'll make sure that layer mask is selected, and I'll just come in here, paint on this mask just like this. Although we can't see the texture now very clear, but that's okay. I can go back and touch it up later on, but I just want to make sure that I'm getting the strands of her hair here. There we go. And if you can see, if I turn the opacity back up, you can see that her hair is not affected by the texture. Look at that. And I can come in here. So it looks like her hair is covering her face, and well, it is covering her face, but being that this is supposed to be her skin, we don't want it. We don't want the skin on top of the hair. It's just the other way around. There we go, something like this. And I don't always get this the first try, so I make a lot of mistakes. So, and we have some other strands here that we can touch up. You know, if you want to get really intricate, really picky about this, you can do this. There you go. That's one strand. It's actually a few strands of hair, but I'm just going to move this across here just to add a little fine detail. And I'll turn this up. And that makes a little bit of a difference, not a whole lot. So I wouldn't worry about that too much. Okay, cool. And we'll probably have the henna piece cover this area of her face anyway, just over here, so you might not see that texture there. I'll probably make a larger brush here, and I'll just go over her eyebrows just a little tiny bit. Something like that. I'll do this side as well. Make those eyebrows just stand out just a little bit more. And let's look over here. If there's anything over here that we need to do, and of course the eyes, we'll get to that in just a second. I just want to look over here a little bit and touch up some of these areas. There we go. We can go ahead and zoom out and take a look at it. Okay, it looks like the hair is coming over the texture there. You see that? So it really looks like it's a part of her skin. And let's zoom into this eye, and I'll just select... Whoops, I'm going to go ahead and select the paintbrush, and I'll make this a little bit larger. And I'll paint on this mask and remove the texture in her eye. Just right to the edge there. Sort of up to you how far you want to go. You know, how far you want to have that texture go into her eye. I'll move over to this side and paint on the layer mask to reveal the eye below here, just like this. You're so close, you know, we can even add makeup. It's just amazing how close we are. It's a really good photograph. I actually emailed a photographer in Utah. His name's Justin Grant at Justin Grant Photography. And I asked him if I could have this photo untouched, and he said sure. So he sent it on over, and he let me use it for the project. And I thought that was pretty cool. So it has a lot of detail. It's a really nice image. But, okay, cool. And that's looking pretty hot there. I could turn up the opacity just a little bit more so we can really make that texture visible. You can start to see that this really looks more realistic now. Now, of course, we have the top here. We could probably adjust that a tiny bit because we can sort of see that line going through there a little bit. And that can be a little bit tricky. So I'm going to turn this hardness all the way up. And I don't remember every single thing I did when I did this project. I have to sort of guess at it a little bit. And again, we're going to have the henna over this portion of her face, but you could see I just made that blend in just a little bit better there. And we have some other spaces here. We could probably add some paint. You know, I could create some other little things like that if I wanted to, just to add to the texture a little bit, but you get the idea. So, all right, well, this is looking pretty hot. What do we do next? Well, let's go ahead and apply the channel mixer color to this image, and we're going to create an image adjustment for that. So let's just come down here at the bottom of the layers palette and click on this button right here, which allows us to create an adjustment layer. And the menu will pop up, and just select channel mixer. Okay. And when this channel mixer comes up, I want you to load a channel setting into this mixer. You can see if I start to adjust this, it will change the look of the image here based on how much green and your balances of the channel colors here. But I've already created a custom setting for this tutorial, and that way you can just load my setting so you wouldn't have to go through here and fiddle with this. In Photoshop CS3, the load menu is right here. Okay. Now, in earlier versions of Photoshop, you might find the load button on the side right here. So whatever you have to do, click around and look for the load preset option, or just the load button, and go ahead and click on that. And what you're going to need to do is go into the project files folder on this DVD and locate the Dream Skin folder, and you'll find the channel mixer file in there. As soon as you get into that folder, you should see the file, and it might look like this, channelmix.cha. And go ahead and highlight it and click on load to load that channel setting. And there you go. Look at that. Now, if you think the color's kind of hideous, then you can come through here and adjust the reds, or do whatever you want with that. And I think I just moved that, so I will probably have to reload that preset once more there. I'm going to go ahead and click OK. Okay, so now that we've applied this color over the entire image, I want to go ahead and mask the eyes because I don't want this color over the eyes. So what I'll do is click on the layer mask of the channel mixer layer and just zoom into one of the eyes, and then select the brush tool on the toolbar. With the foreground set to black, I'll come in here with a brush and just paint on the pupil here, just like that, to make that come through. You can do the whole eye if you want to, but I found that just doing this part of the eye, I thought it looked a lot better, so I want to go ahead and do this side. And this adds a little bit more color into it, makes her a little bit more beautiful with the beautiful blue eyes and all that good stuff. I think actually these are more like a green kind of bluish. We can enhance the blue in her eyes later on. So that's looking pretty hot. We've applied the color over, we've masked the eyes, we've got that texture, looks like it's just right on her skin there. And let's move on now to the henna. So to start the henna, let's just go into the Adobe Bridge, and I'll turn this down here. And Melanie created this little henna for this project. I called her up and I said, hey, can you draw me this little henna or tattoo type of design for this face? I faxed her my face, or I faxed her the photo that I was working with, and what she did is she got some trace paper. She put the trace paper over the face, she printed it out on a printer, and she started to draw this design. And then what she did is she scanned the pencil drawing that she created over the face, and she took it into Adobe Illustrator, and she used the pen tool, and she went around and she sent it back, and I was just like, oh my gosh, this is awesome. So yes, you can do the same thing. So there's a tip. Get a photo, print it out on the printer, whatever it is. It could be a portrait or whatever. Get some tracing paper, and you can get those at art stores. It's just like a see-through transparent paper, but you can draw on it. and place that over the photo. Draw on it, scan it into Photoshop or Illustrator, and then grab the pen tool and make this path around like this. If you want to get really good using the pen tools in Photoshop or Illustrator, check out the vector art tutorial that's on this course, and Melanie will show you step by step on how to master that tool in creating different types of shapes and designs and all sorts of stuff. So check that out. But we're going to start off with this henna image here. So I'm just going to go ahead and double click on this and load it up into Photoshop. Okay, cool. So we have our henna, which is black, or our little tattoo art here. We have that over this white background. So we need to remove this white background. And an easy way to do that, we can just select the magic wand tool and click on the white background. So it looks like this, and it should select everything that's white, and then you just have to press the delete key on the keyboard to remove it. And I'll come over here to select and deselect, and that looks pretty good. It's actually nice and smooth around the edges. That looks pretty good. So I'll just go ahead and zoom out here. Now what we're going to have to do is adjust this henna to fit on her face a little bit better, because we can see that it is just a little bit larger than our photo. When the sketch was done on the printout, that was probably a lot smaller, and then so as soon as it got into Illustrator and now it's into Photoshop, it's a different size, but that's no big deal. What I want you to do is get all the pieces of this henna, all the separate elements here, on their own separate layers. So just select the lasso tool and draw around the different elements here, cut them, and paste them on their own separate layers. And now I can position these parts separately. I can actually make these smart objects if I want to. If you're using an earlier version of Photoshop, if you're using Photoshop CS or earlier, then you can go ahead and skip this part. But I'm going to come over here to Layer, Smart Objects, and convert these as smart objects. That way it'll make them non-destructible. This way, if I decide to resize the henna, I can do so without losing any quality. So I'll make smart objects out of all these separate pieces of the henna. There we go. And I'm just going to click on these and transform them and position them right where I want over the eyes. Okay, cool. All right, so let's merge all these henna layers together. So I'll select one, or link these layers together. If you're using Photoshop CS or earlier, you'll want to link these layers using the link well by clicking on one of the henna parts and then linking the other layers to it, and that'll allow you to link the layers together. In Photoshop CS2 and Photoshop CS3, what we can do is hold down the Control key or the Shift key and select more than one layer, like this. You see that? And then I can come up here to Layer and select Merge Layers. And so now we have it all on one layer. Look at that. Now we can make a duplicate of this, go over to Edit, Transform, and flip this horizontally and place it over on this side over here. I did this, but it's just too perfect. I like to have that gap there. Then I can select both layers, or you can link these two layers together and then move both of them at the same time until you get the center here lined up directly in the middle of her nose, or directly between the eyes. So let's go ahead and take a break, and when we come back, I'm going to show you how to take this henna and turn it into a metal face piece that looks just like this with a texture. So I'll be right back. Alright, welcome back. What we're going to do now is take this henna and make it look like a metal piece for her face. Before I start, I'm going to go ahead and merge these two henna layers here. So I'll just click on the top one and go over here to layer and select merge down. And so I have these all on one layer now. And I want to get this into a channel on the channels palette because we're going to do a couple little blurring techniques and we're going to thicken up the lines of the henna, and then we're going to make it look a little three-dimensional with a bevel by applying the lighting effects. But I'll show you that in just a moment. I want to come up here to select all, and then come over here to edit and just select copy. So we're copying the contents on this layer. I want to go back over to channels and make a new channel, and then come over here to edit, paste. And then I'll come up here to edit, fill, because what we must do now that we've pasted this channel, it becomes a selection, and we'll want to fill this selection in with white. So I'll just come over here and select white and click OK. Okay, cool. I'll come over here to select and deselect. And then what I'll do is just make a duplicate of this Alpha 1 channel by dragging it to the new channel icon right here. And that'll just make a copy of it. And then I'll come over here to Filter, Blur, and select the Gaussian Blur option. And I'll zoom in just a little bit to this henna. Let's see it just a little bit closer there. And I'll start to blur this channel. And there's a reason why we're doing this, because we're going to soften the edges of the henna, but we're also going to blur this and then use the levels adjustment to thicken up the lines in the artwork. So let me go ahead and show you. I'm going to turn up this Gaussian blur just a little bit here. And then I'll go ahead and click OK. And then I'll come over here to Image Adjustments and select Levels. And if you look closely, this will allow me to thicken up the lines and the artwork here. Look at that. So you can see this is what it was before. And I'm just moving this white slider in to the left, but I'm also moving this black slider over to the right, and that's bringing up the darkest areas, but also enhancing the lightest areas with this white slider, and it's just overall thickening the artwork. Okay, cool. So that's looking pretty good. You can see that the lines are just a little bit thicker now, and it's a lot smoother. So I'll go ahead and click OK, and then I'll make a duplicate of this channel. And if this seems just a little bit complicated, you can just go ahead and sit back and watch me do this, and you can come back through the tutorial and stop it or pause it later on. But these are really cool techniques. You can really create some cool stuff by doing it this way. So, and what I'm going to do with this copy, I'm going to go ahead and just go to Filter, Blur, and blur this out just a little bit, something like this. And this will allow us to create the bevel effect that we're looking for. So I'll apply a Gaussian blur, and you'll want to make those edges nice and soft, something that looks like this. And then we'll load this channel, Alpha 1 Copy, by holding down the Control key, which is the Command key on the Mac, and you'll select this channel's contents, almost like selecting the transparency of a layer. And then I'll come over here to Edit, Fill, and for contents, I'll use black, and then I'll click OK. And look at that. And I'll go over here to Select and Deselect. And you can sort of see it's a little bit, sort of looking a little bit more dynamic now. It has a little bit of a bevel look to it, and that's exactly what we want. I want to go back to RGB. I'll go back to Layers, and I can just make this invisible for now. And then I'll come over here and make a new layer. And what I'm going to do on this new layer is fill it with gray. I'm going to come over to the toolbar, and let's just select a medium gray, something like this. And then I'll go ahead and click OK. I'll select the paint bucket, and I'll click on this layer to fill it with gray. All right, next, let's come up here to Filter, Render, and select Lighting Effects. And you're going to love this part. And for light type, let's just keep that on Omni for now. And let's increase the intensity so we can see that gray layer there. And then here's the magic, folks. You see where it says Texture Channel? go ahead and click on this menu right here and come down to the very bottom and you'll find Alpha 1 Copy 2. This is the last channel that we created and modified in the channels palette. So I'm going to go ahead and select this, and you should see the henna appear in the preview. To make it just a little bit more visible, we can increase the intensity to something like this. But what I think I'll do is I want to create the illusion that this henna metal piece is actually curved around the front of her face. You know, sort of like a pair of glasses or something like that, where they're curved just a little bit to form to the face. And so in this case, what we can do is set the light on the left side of the henna, making this side of the henna brighter than the other side. And that will create more of a rounded type look. I can come back to that in just a minute, but what I want to do now is set the color for this lighting effects, because I want the metal piece to have somewhat of a gold type look to it. I don't really want a gray beveled metal henna piece. So to start off, what we can do is change the color of the lights inside the lighting effects. So you can see that we have the light type selected here, which is Omni. Well, it's set to white right now, and we know this because if you look right here, this is the color of the light. So what we can do to create that gold look is we can click on this square, bring up the color picker, and I want to select an orange color, nice bright orange color, something like this, and I'll go ahead and click OK, and we can start to see that gold look starting to work there. And I'll increase the intensity just a little bit so I can bring more yellow into that light. Look at that. Now come down to the properties and you'll find the gloss setting right here. Make sure this is set all the way to shiny, and that'll help you in achieving the best metal look possible. And right here where it says material, well, let's turn that all the way up to metallic. Okay? And then I'll go ahead and adjust the intensity just a little bit more. And we can go ahead and click OK right now to see how this looks, but I'm going to move this over just a little bit because I want this side of the henna brighter than this side. And we can try this out. I'm going to go ahead and click OK, and let's see how this looks. Okay, not bad. It's very close to what I'm looking for. But I can undo that and come back up here to Filter, Render, and select Line Effects, and pretty much work right where I left off before. That's one of the cool things, is that it saves the last spot that you were before. But I'm going to come in here in the intensity and turn that up just a little bit more and move this over. And let's go ahead and click OK. Well, that's looking pretty good. And so I think I like that. And what we need to do now is get rid of this background so we just see the beveled henna. Well, that's pretty easy to do. I can just come over here to the Channels palette and come down here to Alpha 1 Copy, this one right here. So let's just hold down the Control key on the keyboard, which is the Command key on the Mac, and I'll click on Alpha 1 Copy to load this channel as a selection. And if I go back to RGB, you can see that the henna is now selected from this channel. You see that? So we can go back to the Layers palette and then come up here to Select, Inverse, and then I can press the Delete key on the keyboard to remove the background. Look at that. And then I'll just come up here to Select and Deselect. Then I'll just select the Move tool on the toolbar, and I'll hold down the Shift key if I need to, and I'll just move this up and move this over to position it right in the middle. It's just a little bit off because we use the lighting effects, but it's no big deal. I can just get the Move tool and we can reposition this just like so. Now let's add just a little bit of a drop shadow behind this henna. This is pretty easy to do. All I have to do is come up here to Layer, Layer Style, and select Drop Shadow. And I'll just adjust this like so. I'm just going to come in here and add a very slight shadow behind here, but I want that nice and soft there. And I'll go ahead and just zoom in here so we can see this just a little bit closer. And you can see this is before and this is after. I'll go ahead and click OK. Okay, great. Now let's apply the texture to this henna. Okay, this next part is one of my favorites. What we're going to do is apply this paint over where the henna is, and we're going to make it look like the skin is starting to get old around the henna metal. You know, since like if you have some metal, or if you have a like a cheap ring or something like that, I guess it'll develop some type of coloration in the skin. Well, I was playing around with this and I looked at this when I first created the project and I thought it just looked a little bit too plain having just the henna with the metal and the bevel looking like this. It needed a little bit more character to it to really make it look like it was really on her face. So let me show you a little cool trick, and you can call this anything you want. But I really like the discoloration in the skin around the henna. Let me show you what I'm talking about. Let's go over to the layers palette and make a new layer, and then come over to the toolbar, and I want you to set the foreground color to a dark gray, something like around here. And if you want to know what the hex value input is, you can copy the same value that I have here, and you can input this into your Photoshop, and you should get the same color that I have. So after I have that, I'm going to go ahead and click OK, and then I'll select the paintbrush on the toolbar. And we're going to set this brush to a nice soft brush, and the size will vary for this, but I'm going to go ahead and just zoom in to the face here, and I'm going to grab this brush, and I'm just going to paint around on this layer right where the henna is, or almost right on the henna, just like this. And don't worry, it's not going to look anything like this after we get finished here, so it's going to look totally different. And this is pretty much what you want to do, something that looks like this. Okay, now the next step, what we're going to do, come over to the layers palette, and on this layer, let's just call this skin rust. And I'm going to select overlay from this blending mode right here. And then what I'll do is lower the opacity. And you can see what's starting to happen here. You see how that looks? Really gives it a nice color. Look at that. It could be rust from water, or the water has hit the metal and then it's kind of rusted down and into the skin or something like that. You know, whatever. Just use your imagination. Let's move on to the next step. What we're going to do is apply a texture to this henna. Now the texture's already created. Just go into the Adobe Bridge, and I'll make these thumbnails just a little bit smaller here. And the texture's right here. And I'll just double click on this. Now we need to get this texture over to the project image. So I'll select the Move tool and just click on this texture and drag this over to the project. There we go. And I'll just position it like so. So that is a pretty good size texture. It fits nicely over the henna there. And feel free to use this texture on your own projects. Now we must blend this texture with the henna and the metal below it, so it blends in here. So first, what I'm going to do, let's just go ahead and set the blending mode for this. I'm going to come down here to, let's try hard light. Okay. And then I'll come over here to the opacity and just turn that down a touch. Okay, now this doesn't look too great, but the reason I'm doing this is because we're going to decide where we want to set this texture. And then we're going to create a layer mask to delete all the outside texture, so we just have the henna and the texture and nothing else. We don't see that texture anywhere else. So what you can do is select the Move tool, move the texture around your henna, and position it wherever you want. Okay? And you can see this is just going to look awesome because it really looks like it's coming through here, and it really looks like it's on the metal and it's cracking through. Totally gives it a nice rustic look. So after you've positioned that texture exactly where you want it, then what you can do is load the transparency of this layer down here, which contains the henna. And we actually did not name this layer just quite yet, so I'll just put... Alright, so hold down the Control key, which is the Command key on the Mac, and click on the henna bevel layer, and then come over here to Select and inverse this selection. And after you have that, you need to click back on the texture layer for the henna. So after you've clicked on that, press the Delete key. And that'll delete all the outside texture, only keeping the texture over the henna. You see that? I'll come up here to Select and Deselect and take a look at that. I'll get a little bit closer here so you can see what's going on, but look at what we've done. So we've achieved the effect that we are looking for. You can do so many things with the project now that we have these basic things going on here. But I also, as a final thing, what I did is I added a highlight on her nose. And I made a new layer. I just selected the paintbrush, set white as the foreground, a large soft brush here. And all I did really is just brought this brush over here and made a line like this, or a stroke with the brush. And then I went through the blending modes until I found a blending mode that I liked, where it brought out the highlight in her nose. You could use something like this. That'll work just fine. I'll go ahead and lower the opacity just to make her nose stand out a little bit because it's almost hidden. You can see down here what we would need to do to really polish this off is to click on the texture layer on that layer mask and come in here, and we can touch up around the bottom of her nose here because it almost starts to fade away there. We don't have any depth down there for her nose. I'll go ahead and just fudge this a little bit. Something that looks like that, so her nose stands out a little bit more. What we can also do is add a shadow on this side of her nose, on the right side over here. Something like this. And I'll zoom out here. And we can try a couple blending modes for this, which might not work. I'll probably just go ahead and lower the opacity, filter, blur, and I'm moving kind of quick here because these are only techniques for this project. So if you're working on your own, then you're probably not going to have to go through these steps. But I'm just showing you because I promised you I would show you the whole thing. So this is actually one of the things that I had to do to finish it up. But you can see now that we have that shadow over there, it just gives that nose there a little bit more definition. You see that? There you go. And that's pretty much it, folks. That is the Dream Skin. Have fun with that and enjoy applying the same effects to your own projects. And we'll see you guys on the next video.